as expected, Denny Hamlin's team got hit with huge penalties after that incident before the green flag Sunday night. Unfortunately, after the checkered flag, Jimmy Johnson also got hit with an unexpected penalty. We're going to talk about those. We're also going to talk about a whole lot more on today's episode of Out of the Groove. How's it going, you guys? My name is Eric, and welcome to another episode of Out of the Groove. Truck race is tonight. There's just racing, bang, 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 every night this week. Pretty much Sunday through Wednesday, we've got a race every single night. Really exciting. I'm excited for this weekend, too, because they're going to Bristol. Short track Cup Series race is going to be fantastic, because we've got the lower downforce at Bristol. The high downforce at Bristol worked pretty well last year, but I'm excited to see what the low downforce, how that might change the action. Either way, I'm excited because Bristol is Bristol, and Bristol is amazing, but we still have a couple more races at Charlotte before then. The Truck Series is back, and I love the Truck Series. The Truck Series has been phenomenal the last every year, ever since it's existed. So I'm excited for tonight. Chase Elliott, Kyle Busch. We'll talk about the bounty, because the bounty is apparently still on, per Kevin Harvick this morning. $50,000, but now it goes to the winning drivers charity for COVID relief. Now, if Chase Elliott, again, if he's able to beat Kyle Busch tonight, that's when the money will change hands. I'm sure Marcus Lemonis from Gander Outdoors RV, I'm sure he will also match that as well. So the bounty still on, still an added layer of drama. Of course, Chase Elliott and Kyle Busch's recent history with each other makes this race entertaining just by itself, but of course there's also the Truck Series. I'm hyped for the Truck Series if you can't tell already, but we do have a lot of stuff to discuss before the trucks take the green flag after their near 3-month long hiatus. Before I talk about the penalties, before I talk about Kyle Larson, who was also in the news this past weekend, I want to briefly talk about the Xfinity Series race last night. The Xfinity race last night, it was pretty chill for the first 2/3 of the race. You had Kyle Busch and Ross Chastain battling for the lead a few different times. That was pretty exciting, pretty fun to watch. Things really picked up though late when you had, I believe it was Riley Herbst get pinched into the outside wall off of turn 4. Later you had Myatt Snyder turn himself down the backstretch. Then at the end of this race you had Noah Gragson restarting third, just slide up and cause a big wreck off of turn 2 on the restart. Messy race, a couple big hits for guys. Tommy Joe Martins, a lot of damage on his race car, which is a shame because they had a really good run going. I think he was looking for his first career top 10. That's a small team. So really, yeah, a lot of good cars and a lot of mid-pack cars with really good days going. Got their stuff tore up in that wreck. So the end of last night's race was kind of messy, but it came down to a really exciting finish where Austin Cindric almost beat Kyle Busch on the restart. He cleared him. He got ahead of him, but couldn't hold him for the final lap, and Kyle Busch got the win. His 97th career Xfinity Series win. I know people say that Kyle Busch is not impressive. When he wins in the Xfinity, it's not impressive, but I'm sorry, 97 wins is a pretty big number. It was fun being on Twitter because I put this tweet out and sparked quite a bit of debate last night. Late in the race, I said, it's hard to get too excited about many of the Xfinity regulars right now. No Bell, no Reddick, or Custer means the competition this year is significantly weaker. I can't really tell if any of these current drivers really have Cup Star potential. And I will say, the end of that statement, none of these drivers having Cup Star potential, probably isn't entirely accurate. I think a lot of these drivers have star potential. I think even, Harrison Burton, who didn't do a lot in trucks, has a win this year, so that's okay. He has potential to be a Cup Series star. Noah Gragson, who got a win at Daytona this year, won a couple truck races. I think he has star potential. I just don't think they're anywhere close to it yet. I don't think there's really anybody in the Xfinity Series right now that I would write in as a shoo-in to be a future Cup Series star. Of course, people on Twitter were quick to point out, what about Chase Briscoe, who's already won twice this year? What about Ross Chastain, who's already raced in Cup a lot and is looking at possibly a really good Cup Series ride next year? What about those guys? They're stars. They're going to be stars. I don't know. I'd still even be a little wary to call them superstars or future stars as well. The Xfinity Series has put on some pretty good racing, especially these first couple races back this year. A couple great finishes, I will say. But at the end of the day, the Xfinity Series competition is much weaker in 2020 than it was in 2019. That's just true. Christopher Bell, Tyler Reddick, Cole Custer, the big three last year, swallowed up almost all the wins, swallowed up the championship with Reddick. They've all graduated, moved on to the Cup Series, and they've been pretty, okay to start this Cup Series year. Reddick's been okay, has been pretty good at times, but Bell, Custer, they look, they're all mid-pack. They're mid-pack right now in the Cup Series. But those three who dominated the Xfinity last year, they graduated. They're gone. So there's three major roadblocks that are no longer in your way. So I'm sorry, I would expect guys like Noah Gragson or Chase Briscoe, who were constantly getting beat by those three drivers last year, I would expect them to start winning some races this year. That's not to say Chase Briscoe is bad, and believe me, Chase Briscoe made me a fan with his gutsy performance and late race restart at Darlington earlier this past week. But am I ready to declare that those drivers are future Cup Series stars? I'm sorry, no, I'm not ready to throw all my eggs in that basket or to make that level of commitment to any of these drivers. I mean, we've seen Ross Chastain in decent Cup equipment this year in 2020 2020. He's been, in that Ganassi car. The 77's a Ganassi car, and he didn't do much with it this last week. We've seen him in the 6 car, which was a playoff car last year, and couldn't really sniff the top 20 in either of those rides in the first 6 or 7 races of the Cup Series season this year. So even Ross Chastain, I like him a lot. He's fun to watch. I'm not convinced he is a Cup Series superstar in the making just yet. He's got to show me a little bit more. Really, he hasn't made the most of some of his Cup Series opportunities given to him thus far. So I'm not confident. I'm not 100% confident about Ross Chastain. I think that's fair. Tommy Joe Martin's tweeting, gee, thanks, Eric. I'm not talking about Tommy Joe Martins. I like Tommy Joe Martins. Like I said, had a great run going for him. I understand that team's working with what they've got, and they had a great run going for them last night before a wreck that was out of their control took them out. I'm not talking about Tommy Joe Martins when I'm talking about the drivers in really good Xfinity equipment that I just am not super excited about right now. I hope people understand that. I'm not going after Tommy Joe Martins with that tweet. Twitter, man. But, my point is, we've seen great drivers from the Xfinity Series come into the Cup Series and be mediocre. I mean, I think of Austin Dillon, won Xfinity championships, won truck championships. He has a Daytona win. He has a Coke 600 win, so I'll pat him on the shoulder for that, but I'd say most people have been disappointed with Austin Dillon's Cup performance. Ricky Stenhouse, back-to-back Xfinity Series champion. Nobody's really excited about him in the Cup Series either. I've talked about this a ton, but this newest generation of young drivers are not having the immediate Cup Series success that the previous generation of Cup Series drivers did. When Jeff Gordon came into the Cup Series in the early 90s, he won right away. He was a championship threat right away. When Tony Stewart, Matt Kenseth, Kevin Harvick, Dale Earnhardt Jr., Jimmy Johnson, Ryan Newman, Kurt Busch, Kyle Busch even, I would say, and more, when those drivers all came up into the Cup Series in the late 90s, early 2000s, they were almost immediately win contenders, championship contenders. Many of them won championships early in their careers. You just don't see that today. That's not happening in 2020 anymore. Chase Elliott took him 2.5 years to win a race. Ryan Blaney is in his 5th year in the Cup Series. He's got 3 wins. Eric Jones in a Gibbs car is in his 4th year in Cup Series. He's got 2 wins. These aren't horrible numbers or anything, y'all, but it's not the same as, Jeff Gordon winning like 10 races. What was his, 3rd year in the Cup Series? Tony Stewart winning a title in his 4th year. Matt Kenseth winning a title in his 4th year. Kurt Busch winning a title in his 3rd or 4th year. My point is, it's not the same. Jimmy Johnson winning titles in his 3rd year. That's not happening. You're not seeing Chase Elliott. Chase Elliott didn't win the title 2 years ago. Ryan Blaney didn't win the title last year. I'm just saying, even the great drivers from the Xfinity Series in recent years have not turned into great Cup Series drivers, or at least it's taken them a while. Chase Elliott's great now. Obviously, Chase Elliott's a contender now. Alex Bowman's great now, but it's taken them a few years to get to that point. So that's all I was saying in that tweet is, even though Chase Briscoe looks great in the Xfinity Series right now, and I love watching him race these last couple weeks, I don't know, he might get a Stewart-Haas car next year. There's some question marks on the Cup Series side of Stewart-Haas Racing. Maybe he gets one of those rides. I don't know. He might be a playoff contender next year. I really don't know. I would be hesitant to say he's going to do much better than that. The 2020 Xfinity Series field is weaker than the 2019 Xfinity Series field. That's just a fact at this point. I mean, there's one less SHR car out there with Cole Custer gone. The 00 is gone. It's not even racing anymore. There's less full-time RCR drivers out there, and Reddick's gone as well, who's won 2 straight championships. Christopher Bell is not racing anymore, and he's swallowed up so many wins from the Xfinity Series competition the last couple of years, so he's gone. Numbers speak for themselves, guys. The Xfinity field right now is weaker than it was last year. Not a lot weaker. I'm not saying if Briscoe goes out and wins a bunch of races this year that he's not worthy of a Cup Series ride. I'm just wary of calling him a future superstar right off the bat. That's all I'm saying. But people, I appreciate the debate. Made Twitter fun. Made watching last night's race, especially for the first half of the race, which is, okay. Made that a lot more fun. Anyway, let's talk about some NASCAR Cup Series news. That's why we're here. We're here to talk about, tragedy on the Denny Hamlin front. My goodness. During the pace laps for the Coca-Cola 600, a large piece of tungsten fell out the back of Denny Hamlin's number 11 car. Actually got hit by a couple other drivers that were driving by. These heavy tungsten blocks are used by teams to meet minimum weights during inspection, but per the rulebook, if any of this ballast falls out of the car, it's a minimum 4-race suspension for the crew chief, car chief, and lead engineer, I believe. And sure enough, NASCAR dropped the hammer Monday and made those penalties clear and concise for Denny Hamlin. Chris Gabehart will be out the next 4 races. Car chief Brandon Griffith and engineer Scott Simmons will also be out for the next 4 races. Joe Gibbs Racing will not appeal the penalty. They've also already announced a replacement crew chief for the next few races. Sam McCauley will be the replacement for the next 4 races. I mean, it's big news, but it's not hugely important because Denny Hamlin's locked into the playoffs already. He's got 2 wins. Part of why I don't like the winning you're in is, this would matter more if Hamlin was still fighting for a points position, but no, he's locked in already. So it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. I guess a couple less weeks that Chris Gabehart gets to be hands-on, but with the way they've been social distancing at the track, I feel like none of the crew chiefs are super hands-on. So I don't think this is that huge of a deal, but definitely a substantial penalty to a top race team in NASCAR for, yeah, just an incident that we don't see very often. I mean, that was pretty crazy to see at the beginning of yesterday's race. Now, even after the race, post-race inspection was not too kind to second place finishing Jimmie Johnson. His rear end alignment was found to be slightly out of place, so they, of course, awarded him last place points, a last place finish. Everybody else bumps up in the finishing order one position, so third place finisher Chase Elliott actually finishes second. So crew chief Cliff Daniels, after it was announced, immediately expressed disappointment. He believed a part broke, something they weren't aware of. I saw a report this morning that Hendrick Motorsports now knows what actually broke and are convinced that it's not going to be an issue going forward. So I guess that's good news. Hopefully it's just a one-time issue for Jimmie Johnson, but certainly adds insult to injury. You know, I called my race review video a couple nights ago, Chase Elliott is cursed. At this point, I probably should have changed it to Hendrick Motorsports is cursed, because they had a rough night. They've had a rough couple of weeks of finishes despite having really fast race cars, and this is just kind of the icing on the cake. Now, NASCAR, to my knowledge, still only does a complete and full teardown inspection of the first and second place finishing cars, plus a third random car from somewhere in the field. So this is also just a little bit of bad luck again. Jimmie Johnson, if he finished third, likely would not have been inspected to the same degree, and they likely wouldn't have found this infraction. I mean, that's the tough thing. NASCAR doesn't check every single car in the field after every race, so the seventh place finisher might have something horribly illegal on their car and not even realize it because they weren't getting inspected for it. So it is interesting. It is different like that. And it is just another case of bad luck for Jimmie Johnson and the 48 team that they were one of the guys that, of course, got completely tore down. That's what they were doing last year. I assume that's what they're still doing this year. Of course, I have not been able to confirm that that's what they're still doing in 2020, but that's what they were doing before. I would assume they're doing the same. I don't think they're doing more inspection now with all the social distancing and less people at the track. I don't think they're doing more inspection now, but yeah, anyway, it sucks. Jimmie Johnson can't catch a break, y'all. On the plus side, it sounds like they know what went wrong, which leads me to believe maybe it was something they kind of did on purpose, pushing the envelope. Of course, that's what you typically do in NASCAR. You always push the envelope. You can't just be complacent and be completely within parameters. You got to push the edge to be fast. So at least it sounds like they know what went wrong. So hopefully that will prevent any of these sort of missteps in the future. No further penalties for Jimmie Johnson's team as far as what's been announced to this point. So it's just, you know, last place at Charlotte, which sucks. Last place in what will possibly be Jimmy's last Coke 600. But now I do want to transition to the last topic in this video, Kyle Larson. Kyle Larson, of course, he's been out of NASCAR for over a month. Reports are he's completed sensitivity training, so that World of Outlaws, Dirt Racing, of course, reinstated him. NASCAR has not yet reinstated him. It's unclear if Larson has actually requested to be reinstated yet or not, or if he's putting that off, or if that's not a conversation that's been had. We don't know. All we know is that Kyle Larson has raced in a few dirt races now since his firing from Chip Ganassi Racing, and this past weekend, he actually won in just his third World of Outlaws race back. A $20,000 prize for winning at Federated Auto Parts Raceway near St. Louis, Missouri. And actually a pretty cool tidbit, he shattered the track record in qualifying with a sub 10-second qualifying lap around that racetrack. Now, Kyle Larson has been very quiet on social media, just in the media in general, since the incident that led to his firing about a month ago. He's been very quiet, but last night after winning, he was interviewed in Victory Lane, kind of one of the first statements we've heard from Kyle Larson in quite some time. He said in his interview, "I can't thank each and every one of you enough, everybody watching on Dirt Vision at home, all my supporters, it means a lot. And I can't wait to get my journey started and kind of see where my future goes from here." Reports were that immediately after Larson was suspended by NASCAR, suspended by Ganassi, then fired by Ganassi, he was determined to get back into NASCAR as soon as he possibly could. And now, of course, he's turned immediately to dirt racing, his original passion, and is already finding success there, which, I mean, it's not like he forgot how to drive. You know, we knew Kyle Larson would win dirt races if he went back and raced dirt. That's what he does. He wins dirt races. That's his thing. Hard to read a whole lot into that statement right there, but it does sound to me like Larson is hoping to get back in NASCAR one day. I believe that's still probably the plan. That was always his plan growing up. I can't imagine it's not his plan now. Many of his peers, including Bubba Wallace, Denny Hamlin, have already said publicly that they believe Kyle Larson should get a second chance at some point in NASCAR. So I think Larson will be back in NASCAR at some point. I don't know if it happens in 2020. I don't think it happens in the Cup Series in 2020. But as far as 2021 is concerned, with how wide open this free agency is, I think there's a very good chance we'll see Larson in a pretty good Cup Series ride next year, as early as next year. But of course, he still has to be reinstated by NASCAR, and that is not something that NASCAR has said much about to this point. But yeah, I mean, congrats to Kyle Larson. Again, as long as he grows from that incident, as long as he is able to show an understanding as to why what he said was wrong, why he shouldn't do that. I mean, again, I don't have any ill will towards Kyle Larson. I don't want to see this guy completely torn down and have his entire livelihood, the thing he's worked his entire life to be great at. I don't want to see that taken away from him just for the sake of it being taken away from him. I'd love to see him get another chance in NASCAR. But again, he has to show maturity because you can't come into the national scene. You can't come into NASCAR, which is a nationwide, a worldwide thing with millions of dollars of sponsorship on the line. You can't come into this series and expect to be the face of it if you still don't have these just clear social understandings. I mean, that's just the truth of it. That's bad PR for NASCAR, bad PR for you and whatever team or sponsor signs you. So Larson has to demonstrate an understanding that he's improved and grown from that incident before I think he gets a good opportunity in the Cup Series again. But right now, I think he's going about it the right way, and I hope he finds a way to do it, and I hope he gets back to NASCAR at some point because he's obviously a great talent and deserves to be in the top level of stock car racing at some point or another. So keep watching for Kyle Larson. Keep paying attention to what he does on dirt. Keep paying attention to what NASCAR says about him or doesn't say about him when they hopefully say something about him, because Kyle Larson got quite the journey ahead of him, I feel. Anyway, y'all, that's about all I have to talk about in this episode. Kind of went in a bunch of different directions. Talked about everything from Xfinity Series to penalties to dirt racing. Kind of a weird all over the place episode of Out of the Groove. But with the schedule being all over the place, trucks are tonight, Xfinity was last night, Cup is on Wednesday. It's hard to squeeze these videos in. It's kind of it's difficult to figure out what to talk about in every episode because every day there's just so much more on my plate. So much more to discuss. But hopefully I did these topics justice. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode. Thank you for watching. Subscribe if you're new. Follow me on Twitter. Follow me on Instagram. Big thank you to my supporters on Patreon, of course. I really appreciate you guys going to Patreon, supporting the show. I could not do this show without you guys. If you also want to help support the videos, support the channel, you can check out that top link down in the description, y'all. I greatly appreciate it. Hopefully we're able to get back to the racetrack sometime relatively soon, and I can go back to covering races the way I typically do. I greatly appreciate it, y'all. That's all I've got for today's episode. Of course, tomorrow night after Wednesday night's Cup race, I'll have another review episode up. If you missed it yesterday, I posted an interview I did with Brennan Poole, Cup Series Rookie of the Year contender. That was a lot of fun. Got to hear a lot about his backstory, how he got into racing, what it's like racing nowadays with no fans in the stands and all the crazy circumstances around it. Really cool, really in-depth interview with Brennan Poole yesterday. Go check that out if you missed it. I will see you all again very, very soon. Stay safe out there, everyone. I'll be back really quick. We got a lot of racing. There's 2 races probably between now and the next Out of the Groove. So many races, y'all. Oh my gosh.